morning, and thank you for joining us for this week's service, whether you call Epicenter your church or it's your first time joining us. Our current format for Sunday services is a video sermon one week and a live sermon the following week. Today we're having a live sermon, and we will be continuing in the series in the book of Revelation. If you're new to the church, or even if you want to catch up on past sermons on the series, you can scan the QR code displayed on the screen on your mobile device that will direct you to our YouTube channel playlist for this series. If you don't have a mobile device, you can simply go to YouTube, find our channel, Wadena Epicenter, and click on the playlist to access the previous sermons from this series. Today we'll be continuing with part 2 of Revelation chapter 8 and 9, where it covers 6 of the 7 trumpets of judgment. So if you have your Bibles, make sure to take them out and follow along and jot down some notes on your worship program. As it was mentioned last week, due to preparation for VBS, we will not be having Epicenter Kids for a few weeks, but we will resume after VBS has taken place. If you have newborns to 3-year-olds that would like some place to move around, the parent room is available, and you can view and listen to the message from there as well. If you would like something to keep your kids busy during this service, we have a kids worship program, as well as sketch pads that are available on the info table for them to use throughout the service.
John's been gone for a while, so we really needed to see him.
Yeah, have you heard about that guy Nero?
Yeah, I've heard about him. It's rough.
Yeah, it's kind of
intense.
A little intense.
Hey, look who it is, the Apostle John.
Look at that.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, man, it's been a while. How have you been?
I live on an island now.
I mean, who doesn't live on the beach, am I right?
I know I do.
Yeah.
Cold drink, white sand, boiled shrimp.
They tried to boil me.
Huh?
They tried to boil me, but it didn't work.
Well, John, we know you've been writing a book, and we are happy to announce that not only will it be published in the Bible itself,
Revelation.
Sorry, what?
It's Revelation, no, Revelations. It's singular.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, Revelation will be the final book of the Bible.
Finish strong, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, okay. Well, before we send it off to the publisher, we're just going to give it a quick read and we'll get things going.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Not really sure where to start.
Did you like it?
Did we like it?
We didn't like it. We loved it.
Yes.
It's just so, what's the word? It's a bit different.
Yeah, it's different.
It's just that, like, there's so much going on, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, I'm not sure.
Excuse me?
No,
what I think Andy's trying to say is that we think you've taken kind of a different approach than what you have in the past.
Yeah. No, you see, not everything has me worried. Like this bit in chapter 22, it says right here, it says about Jesus coming back, it's gonna be great news, everyone receiving the reward. It's just, that's great. It's just the stuff before that I'm just a little bothered by, just kind of confused maybe.
It's different.
You mean the whole book?
I mean, it's just a bit dark and confusing. I mean, there's bowls, scrolls, beasts, plagues. I mean, what's with the 7-headed dragon?
It's a metaphor.
Oh, like a parable.
No, not like a parable.
Okay, all right.
I think what it comes down to is this book inspired by God? Are these words given to you by God? This book, I mean, were these words given to you by God himself?
Absolutely.
Well, then I guess we're good to go.
I think it just might be hard to read and understand.
It's pretty self-explanatory.
Is it?
Yeah, don't worry. They'll get it.
Who?
Them.
So as we have resumed the book of Revelation, this series, and I've had the opportunity to chat with a number of you now, one of the common statements that is often made is how confusing and not straightforward the book is. It's not very self-explanatory, and you're not alone in that train of thought. The opening clip does a great job at depicting people's thoughts on how that closing installment of the book, which this Wednesday, just kind of to throw this out there was a great question that Milo actually asked this morning, but it's why is that the final book? Why is there not more? And who got to decide what books stay in the Bible and what doesn't? So here's a quick plug. We'll be talking about that on Wednesday during our live group if you want to join us for that. Anyways, moving on. But this clip does a great job at trying to kind of put that thought into it's dark, it's confusing, it's different, there's a lot going on, and there's a seven-headed dragon that just doesn't really add up. And while there's still debate and different views on the book of Revelation among theologians, people that study the Bible all the time, part of the problem that people have is when they read it, they try to read it without a cultural and historical foundation. In other words, they're just reading the book for what they think it means. It's like going into Mexico and assuming that things are going to function the way that they do here in the States, right? It's very different culture, and you have to understand the culture and history of it. The other thing is they try to apply no overarching context. In other words, they see the book of Revelation as completely different, or like it has nothing to do with the rest of the Bible when it's completely immersed in it. And the last thing is they try to force this literal interpretation based on preconceived ideas, for example, like the seven-headed dragon, when things are actually conveyed to be symbolic. And the Bible actually tells us what's symbolic. And while there's supernatural and crazy sounding things to lost people that the Bible records as literal, the book of Revelation uses a lot of symbolism when it comes to describing visual attributes of Jesus. Once again, when you get to heaven, is Jesus going to look like he has two little torches for eyes and all these things? And we already tackled that. The answer is no. It's describing symbolism when describing beasts, dragons, people, and the list can go on. So taking this as literal is really difficult. So now, once again, you're going to sound crazy to the world. Talking donkey in the book of Numbers, that's literal, as crazy as it sounds. The beast with 7 heads in Revelation, not literal. That's metaphoric. The creation account found in Genesis, as difficult as it is, and we've talked about this on Wednesdays, it's literal. The prostitute in Revelation, not literal. It's symbolic. And we're going to talk about how we can understand those things in the weeks ahead. Now, people will think that you're weird for believing things in the Bible, but the book of Revelation doesn't have to be one of them. Currently, we're going through the series on the book of Revelation, and 2 weeks ago, we started on the topic of the 7 trumpets that will set off events and that will be difficult, that will bring mass casualties, people will die. And for part 1, we talked about how the plagues of Egypt paralleled the trumpets in Revelation, so Old Testament, New Testament, and whether these trumpets will be audible to the human ear. We actually watched a video from... I'm trying to remember the network, but it was something that's been heard around the world, and they believe that maybe these are the trumpets from the book of Revelation. Is the Bible actually saying that we're going to hear these trumpets audibly to the ear, or is it inaudible to the human senses, but something that's taking place in heaven? Today, for part 2 of this topic, we'll be looking at what each trumpet is ushering in, what the results of it are going to be, and whether the description is literal or symbolic. And this is not based on assumptions, but in context of what the passage itself is saying and potential cross-references. We're going to look back to the Old Testament and see how this matches up. So if you have your Bibles with you, turn with me to the book of Revelation, we're going to be focusing on chapter 8, starting in verse 7. If you don't have your Bibles with you, the reason that you're seeing that QR code is because you could actually scan that QR code and it'll give you a free download for the Bible, and you'll have all the different translations. So whether you have an iPhone or you have an Android, hopefully you have an iPhone, you're better than that. You could actually download the app. It's free. Once again, you'll have all the different translations in all sorts of different languages. But really quickly recapping from where we will be picking up on today, we're going to go back a few weeks, actually a few months back, and we're going to be picking it up, or we're going to be recapping, where there were 7 seals, right? So the book of Revelation describes 7s. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. The 7 seals that were broken, we already talked about that, caused chaos and destruction that were executed by the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Followed by description of martyrs, people that died for their faith in heaven, and the 6th seal climaxed into this great earthquake. The 7 seals concluded with 30 minutes of silence, an incense burner being thrown to earth filled with fire that caused thunder to crash, lightning to flash, and another terrible earthquake being described. That's going to be important. Once again, that's how it ended with the first 7 seals. And then 7 trumpets are given to 7 angels that will usher in more severe judgments. And if you're confused right now, don't worry, we're going to make sense of this. So follow me on this. Okay, now starting in verse 7 of chapter 8, this is where we left off 2 weeks ago. It says that the first angel blew his trumpet, and hail and fire mixed with blood were thrown down on the earth. 1/3 of the earth was set on fire, 1/3 of the trees were burned, and all the green grass was burned. I'll be talking about this. I'm actually ready for the next topic because I couldn't fit everything into one sermon. But one of the things that we have to understand is when we read this, it kind of makes us feel terrified, right? Because there's a lot going on. But we're going to be breaking it down into what it actually means. And we'll continue to go through this, and hopefully this will kind of bring some ease in what we've heard from the church for, at least maybe if you grew up in a conservative, very spiritual, without biblical church like I did. So there are things that are described as being thrown down to the earth: hail, fire, and blood, right? So hail is probably the least difficult for us to understand, as this weather phenomenon is not unheard of. As a matter of fact, throughout the summer, more than likely you've already experienced hailstorms. We actually had one not that long ago. What's unique about this, and what's going to get even more unique about it in the weeks ahead, is the extent of the damage that it's causing. If you joined us 2 weeks ago, during part one, we talked about the parallels of the plagues of Egypt to the judgments that are described in the book of Revelation. Just in case you didn't join us, if you're familiar with the story of Moses parting the Red Sea, prior to the parting of the Red Sea, there's plagues that take place in Egypt. And when you get to the book of Revelation, you begin to see that there's a lot of parallels. One of the plagues of Egypt that is recorded in Exodus chapter 9, verses 13 through 35, is hail, that is described in verses 25 and 26 as a storm unlike anything in all the history of Egypt. This was a terrible storm that produced a lot of hail. With such devastating hail and continuous lightning, it left all of Egypt in ruins. The hail struck down everything in the open field, people, animals, and plants alike. Even the trees were destroyed. It starts to sound a lot the same like the book of Revelation. This was an event confined to the land of Egypt, though, right? So the book of Exodus is talking about what took place in Egypt. There is historical evidence to support that there was something that took place in the land of Egypt. And now it's being described, though, as something that is impacting 1/3 of the world as a whole. It's everyone. It's not just Egypt, it's everyone. Once again, the fraction that is being used to describe the extent of the damage is not literal. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. It's simply a symbolic representation of the damage. We talked about how if there's a tornado, people will say, well, half of the city was without power, right? That doesn't mean that if there's 4,000, 2,000, exactly 2,000 people were out of power. It's just a figure of speech. However, as we look at this passage, the scale of the damage is symbolic, but I believe that the impact is literal. It's talking about a literal impact in the whole world, actually 1/3 of the world. Another thing that is mixed with the hail and the fire falling from the sky is blood. Now, this is definitely not common, right? I mean, it's really difficult to try to reconcile how blood can fall from the sky. But here's the thing. If John is simply trying to describe what he is seeing, a possibility of maybe what he is trying to describe as something known as red rain or blood rain. And this actually does happen in nature. So this is something that is not photoshopped. It's not dirty water. You know, it didn't happen in Arizona where the dirt is red and it just kind of got mixed. That's not the case. This actually fell from the sky. And it is something that, even though it's not a common occurrence, it is something that has happened historically. And this is actually taken in India, and it's more recent. It's within the last 2 decades that it took place. It might actually be within the last decade. So the thing is, it's not actual blood. It's not blood that fell from the sky. But if you were to see this falling from the sky, and there is actual video footage, and you can look, it's not Christian sources. It's actually secular sources that will point you to the fact that this does take place. if you were to see this taking place, the perfect way to describe it would be as blood falling from the sky. That would be a great way to describe what is taking place. Now, there has been different theories that have been put forth in regards to what causes the blood rain or the red rain. In the event of India, which you're seeing, it is believed that what caused this was done by aerial spores of green microalgae, but the reality of it is it's uncertain. We really don't know what causes it. Whether this could potentially, I'm not saying that it is, I'm just simply saying, whether this could potentially be something close to what the Bible is describing, it's uncertain. It could be, it could not be. But one thing that we must remember is that not everything that God causes to happen has to have a natural origin of explanation. You know, I don't know how many people I've talked to that whether they're atheists or agnostics, and one of the things that they say is, if there was enough evidence, I would believe in God. The difficult thing is that, I'm just as much a skeptic as the next guy, right? And as much as you put forth the evidence, they're always trying to find a natural explanation to completely disregard it. The fact of the matter is, not everything is going to have a natural explanation. There's things that don't make sense. We talked about this in regards to miracles. Do miracles still take place? Absolutely. Do they take place as often as people believe they do? The answer is no. Even if we look at the Bible, we're talking about the ministry of Jesus, which took place in a span of about 3 years in a large area, and it was something that didn't happen as a common occurrence. Most times you'll see that people were astonished at what was taking place. So there's going to be things that happen in the world, whether it's miracles or anything else, that might not have a natural explanation. And we just have to be okay with that. So with that being said, it leads to the third thing that is described, and that is fire that is falling from the sky, which is a little bit more difficult to reconcile, right? How does fire fall from the sky? One suggestion is that the fire that is falling from the sky is a meteor shower that is leading up to the disaster that we're moving on to, the second trumpet, and it's ushering that in. And while it's certainly a possibility, once again, we have to keep in mind that the Bible will at times describe events that seem bizarre to us, and they're going to be difficult to reconcile with our experiences, that may very well not be able to be explained by the natural laws of physics. It's difficult. We understand that there's things that operate in the physical and the metaphysical, the natural and the supernatural. So in some ways, John is describing what he is seeing using symbolic language. Imagine trying to describe things that you have never seen and trying to describe it to people that don't live in your era. How do you use description for that, right? What kind of description do you use? You're going to use symbolic language. And that's what he's doing. It's not very straightforward to us. Nonetheless, he's describing what he's seeing taking place. As we have seen throughout the whole book, and as we'll see once we get to Trumpet 5, John is going to begin to use a lot of this. It was like. So if you really look at that, he's not telling you what he's seeing. He's telling you a description of what it looks like that he's seeing. Very different language. If I tell you, hey, I saw a helicopter, I saw a helicopter. If I tell you, I saw something that was flying in the air and it was making loud noises, it was like a mosquito, but only bigger, that's symbolic. It's not a mosquito, right? We understand that. And that's what he's going to be doing in Trumpet 5. The difficult part is he's not using that kind of language here. He's not saying that it's symbolic. It doesn't seem to imply that. He's simply saying that he saw these three things from heaven fall down and cause chaos on the earth. An alternative view, and once again, I typically state where my position is on these things, but you have to understand there's more than one interpretation when it comes to these things. An alternative view presented on the website BibleRef.com states that there's some interpreters who speculate that the earth refers to the land of Israel. Most times people try to attribute everything to the land of Israel. In the end times, I don't believe that that's the case unless it's specified. But they speculate that earth refers to the land of Israel as the object of God's judgment. Along those lines, they interpret trees to mean Israel's leaders who have gone apostate, which would mean that they abandoned or renounced the faith. And grass to mean Israel to represent Israel as a weak nation. They base these interpretations on Isaiah chapter 2, verse 13, which compares proud leaders to cedars and oaks, and on Isaiah chapter 40, verses 6 through 7, that compares all flesh to grass that withers. Now understand, even though I believe that the book of Revelation is filled with symbolisms and metaphors, I don't believe that that's the case here. And I think that's really complex to try to make sense of it. I think people are trying to add more symbolism that's not there. And it's not because I'm cherry picking what I want to be symbolic and what I don't want to be symbolic. But here's one reason that I believe that it's not symbolic. As we see this, these events seem to be literal because in the sixth trumpet, it says that these plagues, they're described as plagues, they're affecting or killing literal individuals who refuse to repent even after they're enduring these events, right? The plagues are impacting people. It's not representing people that are affecting people. That would be confusing. So now moving on to the second trumpet, recorded in verses 8 and 9, it says that then the second angel blew his trumpet, and a great mountain of fire was thrown into the sea. 1/3 of the water in the sea became blood. 1/3 of all living things in the sea died, and 1/3 of all the ships on the sea were destroyed. One thing that some people know about me, actually most people know, is that I'm a fan of documentaries. I love documentaries. What most people don't know, though, is that I'm a sucker for apocalyptic end-of-the-world movies. I love them. As a matter of fact, I just watched one last night. But in 1998, there were 2 movies that were released that depicted the end of the world through a process of a giant asteroid colliding into the earth. These 2 movies were Deep Impact and Armageddon. Who doesn't love a good Ben Affleck movie? If you've watched the movies, you may remember that prior to the impact of that giant asteroid hitting the earth, there's small pieces of debris, asteroid debris, that is falling and impacting life on earth, right? So it's causing chaos even before the big thing gets here. So as I already mentioned, there's speculation that Trumpet 1 is describing kind of what those movies describe, right? Here's all these falling meteorites that are impacting life on earth, destroying life on earth in regards to causing fires, causing chaos, destroying 1/3 of the world. And simply what Trumpet 2 is describing is this giant mountain-sized meteorite that is going to land in the sea and affect and kill everything in the sea, or 1/3 of it, and then affecting sea commerce. In other words, there's going to be no trading going on, or at least not to the extent, because 1/3 of the ships are destroyed. Whether the events that are unfolding are in succession or not, whether they're coming one after another, it's something that we don't know, but something that is undoubtedly true is that these events are progressing into something more difficult. So up to this point, there's wildfires that have destroyed the grass that feeds the livestock, and 1/3 of sea life has died off. This cosmic event has also crippled global trading for food, which more than likely it'll bring up inflation. And it's going to lead to Trumpet 3, which is found in verses 10 and 11, where it says that then the third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from the sky, burning like a torch. It fell on 1/3 of the springs and on the springs of water. The name of the star was bitterness. It made 1/3 of the water bitter, and many people died from drinking the bitter water. Up to this point, we have 3 stellar events that share similarities, but they're having different impacts, right? They're all coming from the sky. They're all affecting the earth, but they're affecting it differently. This third event has another star that is falling from the sky, but rather than simply impacting one specific location, it has an impact on 1/3 of fresh water source. right? So it's going to affect life on earth. One of the things that I was trying to avoid doing through this topic is getting deep into the speculation of what it could be, because that typically generates one of two things. It generates intrigue or it generates fear. If you know me personally, you understand that I'm a person of faith, but I'm not a religious person in the sense that we have to separate both. Sometimes we like to scare people into believing and adopting this worldview versus being a person of faith that understands that things will get worse, that things will get difficult, but ultimately God's in control, and I don't have to over-spiritualize everything. And if you're on Highway 10, this is not picking on people, but you don't have to go far to see that there's a sign that says, final events coming up, so forth and so on. There's this way to generate fear in people, to kind of try to get you to, hey, take things seriously, come on. And one of the things that I'm trying not to do is I'm not trying to take that route. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to intrigue you. I'm just simply trying to say, hey, these are some views. And I was trying to avoid that, but there's a reason that I am elaborating on these. And even though we're not going to tackle it today, because I know that we separated it into another part, or I separated it into another part, because the message would have been about an hour and 15 minutes long. There's a reason that I'll have to come back to it, but understand that I'm going through these things not to generate fear, not to generate intrigue, but to paint a bigger picture that hopefully you'll kind of get at the end of the service today, but you'll get more in 2 weeks as we conclude with this. But there's two speculations as to the potential source of the great star that is mentioned in Trumpet 3. What causes chaos and pollutes the world, or the water sources, could potentially be, this is one speculation, which I don't think that it holds much merit, but nonetheless, it's that it's a nuclear explosion that emits radiation and pollutes 1/3 of the fresh water. That would be this star that ultimately lights up the sky, pollutes the earth, and the water sources that are undrinkable. The second one would be something like the Tunguska event, if you've heard of it. If not, it's something that took place in 1908, and it actually happened again in Russia on February 15th of 2013, and it was actually captured on video. This was a meteor airburst that takes place where a small asteroid enters the atmosphere, but it breaks off into fragments and causes the explosion. You may have seen the video of the Russia one in February 15, 2013. Windows were shattered. You hear the alarms of cars going off, and it's just chaotic. Now, the reason that some people speculate that it might be something like that is because you have this meteorite that's penetrating the atmosphere. Ultimately, it blows up. You have fragments of rock that could ultimately disperse and affect water sources. However, as one source points out, and I believe this is pretty significant, the Great Lakes in the USA, they're a series of connected bodies that hold more than 1/5 of all the world's water or freshwater sources. If you were to impact just simply the Great Lakes in the USA, that would affect 1/5 of the entire freshwater source of the world. So there's ways that you could ultimately affect the fresh water supply without having to get so creative, and it's going to pollute and kill a lot of people. That's the point of it. And understand that there's many viruses, bacteria, chemicals, and poisonous substances that can kill people if it's absorbed into the body. I mean, there's many ways. As a matter of fact, if you go west, there's freshwater sources in Yellowstone that contain a high level of arsenic. There's actually rivers that are extremely high in arsenic that can kill you if you drink that water. But what is being described here is not, once again, growing up within the church, it seemed like there was some people that are like, where's the USA in the Bible? It's like, dude, this is like global, right? I mean, stop trying to find ourselves there. Just look at the big picture. But what is being described here is a worldwide event that will impact 1/3 of all drinking water, leading to the death of many. And verse 12 continues by saying that then the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, and 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars, and they became dark, and 1/3 of the day was dark, and also 1/3 of the night. There's a lot of darkness. I don't know if you've ever been in a position where somebody asks you a question, and after the question is asked, all that you can say is, I got nothing. There's no way to answer the question because you have no answer for it. That's what's happening here. So up to this point, there are speculations as to how maybe these events can unfold in a natural way. But when you get to this passage, the only way that this can be explained is often as something that insurance companies refer to as an act of God. In other words, hey, something happened, and ultimately, this is an act of God. I mean, there's no way to explain it naturally. This, again, strikes a parallel. And I'm not trying to kind of go back to the book of Exodus, but if you go back to the book of Exodus, just for a second, it strikes a parallel when, if you remember, if you know the story, Moses is performing these signs and wonders by the power of God, and ultimately the magicians are able to replicate everything that Moses is doing, right? To a certain point. Then you get to this point where they can no longer do it. They just say simply, we can't replicate it. This is the power of God. That's what you're seeing here. When you get to Trumpet 4, there's cosmic events that are taking place in the universe, and we have nothing in the natural world that can explain 1/3 of the stars, 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon to ultimately go dark. It has to be an act of God. Interestingly enough, Jesus refers to this in Luke chapter 21, verses 25 and 26, where he says that there will be strange signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and people will be terrified at what they are seeing come upon the earth, for the powers in the heavens will be shaken. So Jesus refers to it. And once again, I don't know that I've ever come across anything that people speculate could potentially be the source of the darkness that is caused here. So while everything that we've talked about is being initiated and carried out by God's sovereign will, and undoubtedly are stellar events that we can't reconcile, we understand that ultimately God is in control. Okay, so the first 4 trumpets have initiated a lot of difficulty, and as chapter 8 closes, the first 4 trumpets, John says, and this is where it gets really interesting. John says in verse 13, "Then I looked, and I heard a single eagle crying loudly as it flew through the air." And the word that is used, depending on your translation, is woe, which would, a better translation for modern English would be terror, terror, terror to all who belong to this world, because of what will happen when the last 3 angels blow their trumpets. So a good way to summarize what this verse is saying is things were really bad, and things are about to get a lot worse. So just a quick note, just in case you're reading out of the KJV, I know that there's a lot of proponents for KJV only, and I know that there's a lot of wordage that people try to argue and say, that's the reason that I don't read anything else but the KJV. If you have a KJV, more than likely you see that it says that there was an angel that said this, rather than a single eagle, as we saw. But the actual word that is used there is aetos. And that is usually defined as an eagle or a vulture, not an angel. And because of the extent of damage that has been caused up to this point, there's speculation that what John is actually seeing is not an eagle, but likely a vulture, due to all the death and chaos that is taking place. And it's symbolic of saying, hey, there's more on the way. There's more mystery, sorrow, grief, and distress coming. Now, this would be a good place for me to stop just because I got about 17 seconds left, but if you don't mind, I'm just going to finish up with Trumpet 5 because this is going to set it up for the next week so that we could actually end on time. So it continues, chapter 9, which is the turn of the chapter, continues with Trumpet 5, and it states that then the 5th angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the earth, or that had fallen to earth from the sky. That's significant. And he was given a key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. When he opened it, smoke poured out as though from a huge furnace, and the sunlight and air turned dark from the smoke. Then locusts came from the smoke and descended on the earth, and they were given power to sting like scorpions. They were told not to harm the grass or the plants or the trees, but only the people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. There's a specific target that is given to them. They were told not to kill them, but to torture them for 5 months with pain like the pain of a scorpion's sting. In those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. The locusts looked like, right? Now here's the symbolism. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. They had what looked like gold crowns on their heads, and their faces looked like human faces. They had hair like women's hair and teeth like the teeth of lion. They wore armor made of iron, and their wings roared like an army of chariots rushing into battle. Right? It roared like. It's giving symbolisms. They had tails that stung like scorpions, and for 5 months they had the power to torment people. Their king is the angel from the bottomless pit, the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek, Apollyon, the destroyer. Okay, so this is probably kind of the more intriguing part of the first 5 trumpets, because now we have a lot of symbolism. So as we get to the 5th trumpet, we have another stellar event that is described. Now this is the reason that it's important to understand the context of what it was saying. This time, it didn't say that it fell, it says that it had fallen. It's past tense. It's not happening at that point. It had already happened. It had fallen to the earth from the sky. So verse 1 tells us that this star is given a key that opens the bottomless pit. So based on this, it is safe to assume that the star that is mentioned is not an inanimate object, but rather a person that had fallen to the earth from the sky, that is given the key to, for lack of a better word, hell. This is the devil. Another important thing to note is that the key to the bottomless pit does not belong to Satan. Did you notice how it was given to him? This is where things start to get difficult, and this is the reason that I wanted to tackle this part today, because otherwise it would just kind of get discouraging hearing everything else that is going on. And it's going to present something that's really difficult, but hopefully it's more for life application as we go through life and things get difficult. Sometimes the difficult part about what I just said is that this doesn't seem to line up with the God that we have come to believe in, but it's a God that is revealed in Scripture. The passage is telling us, this is what it's telling us, right? This is not me inserting thought. This is not me telling you what I believe it says. It's telling us that God is permitting Satan to have the key to the abyss to unleash hell on earth. That doesn't seem like the God that most people believe in. The God that wouldn't allow something bad to take place. But if we look here, it seems like God is ultimately saying, hey, here's the key. Do what you need to do. Now, the difficult part about this, and this is the reason that I wanted to get to this topic, is because I think that when it comes to life in general, there's things that ultimately we're going to endure difficulties, and there's going to be things that are not necessarily the greatest to go through, and we might wonder why God would allow something like that to take place. And the book of Revelation is telling us that God is permitting for things to take place that are difficult for the inhabitants of the earth. If we go to the book of Job, one thing that we will quickly realize is that the devil can only do as much as God permits him to. He can't do any more than that. In Job's life, we see that there's limitations in what the devil can take, or even what he can destroy, what he can affect, and even those things that he's impacting. While it doesn't make much sense to us why God would permit the devil to cause difficulty in the lives of people, this is what we have to remember. We have to remember that God is sovereign and is not confined to our understanding and our experiences. A number of years back, during one of the sermons, I talked about how, when I was growing up, I had this idea of what my life was going to be like. I had a plan, and I was going to, invest my life into music, and I was going to ultimately get married, maybe at the age of 30, have my first kid, and maybe just have one or two. I got married at the age of 20. I have 6 kids, a family of 8, and that happened immediately afterwards. Now, as I look back on that right now, I can honestly say, man, I'm glad that I upgraded. At the time, that would have terrified me. And sometimes we have things in our lives that are difficult to reconcile, why God would permit them, but ultimately God in his sovereignty understands that there are things that are for our benefit. And we have to remember that God is not confined by what we think. God understands beginning to end. And there are things that may not make much sense to us at the moment, but with time, whether it be later in life or maybe in our eternal state with Jesus, hopefully, we will understand it. This last week, my daughter Milani posted this verse on her social media page, and it does a great job at summarizing our questions in light of God's sovereignty. Why does God allow certain things to take place? The verse is found in John chapter 13, verse 7. And Peter is asking Jesus why he's doing something. It doesn't make sense to him. And Jesus responds with this, and once again, John chapter 13, verse 7. You don't understand now what I am doing, but someday you will. There's things that we're seeing, and we might not understand it. We might not see the bigger picture, but God does. And Jesus is saying, hey, you know what? You may not understand what's taking place, but one day you will. Even though God has the power, authority, and ability to withhold that key from Satan so that hell on earth is not unleashed, he has given the key to the bottomless pit, the abyss, that releases a horde of creepy-looking locusts that are described to look like this. Right? I mean, if you really take that literal, that's what that looks like. That's what that locust is going to look like. These are the stuff of nightmares. But as stated earlier, the language that John is using to explain their description is not literal, it's figurative, it's symbolic. The objective of these locust-looking creatures are not targeted at vegetation like normal, locusts. So off the bat, we understand these are not locusts. Their target is people, and it's a specific type of people. It's people who are not believers. The aim is, and their purpose is to sting with the end of their scorpion-like tail to inflict extremely excruciating pain that will cause people to wish that they were dead, but death is going to escape them. You know, women always refer to men being sick as having man colds, because we over-exaggerate sometimes. But a few months back, I remember I was super sick, and we had gone to go see my son in his track meet, and as I'm coming back, I mean, I just could not stay warm. I remember we stopped at Marshall's, and I told my wife, I just need to buy a blanket, and she drove, and I'm shivering. I mean, I don't know, I assume I had a high fever, but to be honest, at that point, knowing the pain that I was experiencing, I was like, man, death is so much better right now than what I'm feeling, right? I mean, and in a way, you're kind of wishing for death. That's what it's describing. There's going to be excruciating pain that people will wish that they could die, but death will not come. So these creepy little creatures aren't going to look like that in regards to what John is describing. But one of the popular views that people have in regards to this description, once again, I'm not trying to give you speculation. There's a reason, and hopefully you'll join us 2 weeks from now as we conclude this part of it. But one of the ideas that people have in regards to what they will look like is like this, an Apache helicopter, right? So this is a little bit unique, but it talks about, wings that sounds like chariots. So that would be the propellers. You're kind of hearing like what sounds like an army rushing. A crown of gold could be a symbol on top of the helicopter. The faces of men would be the people that are actually inside the helicopter. The teeth of lion could be drawn onto the Apache helicopter. It's made out of iron, so breastplates of iron. That would be the body. The tail of the scorpion looks like that thing in the back that gives you the direction. There are a number of issues with this theory, though. There's a number of issues. However, I do believe that there's some merit to the fact that I do believe what John is trying to describe is something that was not part of his culture and his time, but something that is more modern and technology, or at least something that is going to look different than anything that he would have experienced then. But I believe that this Apache helicopter is a stretch. But if somebody wants to creep you out, they would say, yeah, it's Apache helicopters. It's a war. Okay, so now this is how we're ending. Let's start over again with that passage and let's try to make sense of it. After the star, the devil is given the key to the bottomless pit, which is where some fallen angels go to and are kept. And actually, in Luke chapter 8, verse 31, there's a passage where demons are begging Jesus to let them go into pigs, but not to send him back to the bottomless pit, to the abyss. So if you go to Luke chapter 8, verse 31, you'll see that demons don't want to go there. But this is where these demon beings are being released to inflict pain on the people of the earth. Not God's people, people who don't have the seal of God. These beings that are given authority to cause pain that is severe enough to wish people that they could die, but death will evade them. Death will flee from them. The description given does seem to indicate an army. And if you go back to the Old Testament, once again, you have to cross-reference. The prophet Joel says this in chapter 1, verse 6. And it sounds exactly like what John describes in the book of Revelation. A vast army of locusts has invaded my land, a terrible army too numerous to count. Its teeth are like the lion's teeth, its fangs like those of a lioness. It sounds exactly the same, right? They're both describing the same event. The invasion seems to suggest that it's a military invading of some sort. However, Revelation chapter 9, verse 11 tells us that these things that are released from the abyss have a ruler. They have a king. And then we're introduced to another high-ranking fallen angel by the name of Abaddon in Hebrew, which literally means destruction, and Apollyon in Greek, which literally means one who destroys. This guy's going to destroy, right? His goal is to destroy. So as we talked about during part one of the topic, the difficulty people have is separating things that are mundane in contrast to the things that are metaphysical. And this is a challenge. Will we be able to see these demonic creatures, or could there be a different way to understand this? And because of the description of a potential army or military invasion, I believe that the pain that is being inflicted is derived from people, but this is where we must also understand how the physical and metaphysical collide. As mentioned already, the book of Job helps us to understand and to see that the enemy can only do as much as God allows him and permits him to. If we go back to the book of Job, after the devil says, Job only serves you because of what he gets, right? In other words, take everything away from him and Job will curse you. Job will pretty much disown you. Job chapter 1 verse 12 says that the Lord said to Satan, all right, you may test him. God's giving him permission. Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but do not harm him physically. It says that Satan leaves the Lord's presence, and what follows is an account of how the devil is going to inflict suffering in the life of Job. So we're going to get a vantage point. I know that I'm going over, I apologize, but I think this is crucial. So let's just really quickly look at the account of Job. It says that the Sabians, who are people from what is now Yemen, which is located south of Saudi Arabia, modern day, these people go and steal all of Job's animals and kill all his farmhands. And then we also understand that the Chaldean raiders, who are speculated to have been located in the northern part of modern-day Saudi Arabia, they end up stealing his camels and killing his servants. I guess a better way to put it is the devil is in the details. Another example that we can see is when Jesus is betrayed prior to his crucifixion. John chapter 13, verse 21 records that Jesus says that he is deeply troubled, and he exclaimed, I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me. And he's talking to his disciples. And then it says, verse 26 and 27, it says, Jesus responds by saying, It is the one to whom I give the bread I dip into the bowl. And when he had dipped it, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. When Judas had eaten the bread, Satan entered into him. Then Jesus told him, hurry and do what you're going to do. Now, this is the reason that it's important. Based on this, I believe that what we're seeing is the exact same scenario. The keys to the bottomless pit is given to Satan. Ultimately, hell is unleashed. And ultimately, we tend to think that there's going to be these creepy-looking locusts, demonic things that are going to be all over the world causing pain. I believe that what it's describing, it's people inflicting pain on people, but the devil is in the details. And while it's uncertain, ultimately, what the representation of the locust is, once again, I believe that it's demonic entities who are permitted to be released and inflict pain on the people of this world. So let me try to summarize it this way. There's things in our lives that ultimately will cause pain. There's things in our lives that are ultimately going to be difficult. And sometimes we will not understand why God is permitting for something like that to take place. We have to understand that for whatever reason God is allowing that to take place, you might not understand it now, but you will understand it later. The second part of that is that when we look at things as a whole, we're seeing that God is not the one that's inflicting pain in your life, but ultimately it's allowing Satan. But Satan can only do so much, and it's only as much as God permits him to. There are limitations in time in the book of Revelation. There are limitations in this life and what the devil can do to us. Verse 12 wraps up trumpet 5 this way. The first terror is past, but look, 2 more terrors are coming, which we're going to continue with 2 weeks from now. I know that we're ending things looking pretty grim, and it's not the best cliffhanger. As a matter of fact, it's kind of depressing. But without completely jumping to the conclusion of the message from 2 weeks from now, one thing that we have to hold on to is the fact that the book of Revelation is, the best way to define the book of Revelation is it's an unveiling, right? It's telling us in advance what's going to take place. And this is how we should draw comfort, right? Whether it's in our circumstances that we don't understand right now, or whether it's looking at the book of Revelation in fear, we have to be comforted knowing that this is not something that is going to take God by surprise. As a matter of fact, he's telling you, this is how it's going to go. And when you start to see these things, stop panicking. I have this under control. I know how it ends. And here's the final chapter of the story. I return, I win. It is simply a climatic battle that is a disclosure in how things will play out. But understand this, that it is a battle that's already been won. Let's pray.